And so anyways, welcome to our webinar. Appreciate you guys taking time, and hopefully, this will be helpful, and there might be some things, that you take away from it. And as I'm going through here, feel free to raise your hand or whatever if you have a question or anything about the information. This can be totally interactive. Doesn't look like we got a huge audience here, so just feel free to go ahead and do that. I have somebody as like a moderator so they can unmute you or whatever. So anyways, just to kind of get started and give you a little background on myself, and before we get into the presentation, I basically am a serial entrepreneur. I've had multiple tech startups over the past 20 years. A couple of them I've exited and sold. It's all been around internet, web, software development. And some of the stuff that most of what I've done is commercial business. I have done some federal and state and local as well. But, me and my teams, we've done stuff like Library of Congress. We built the online publisher portal for all the publishers in the United States on Oracle technology. US Bank built their first online reverse auction. But I go out and I close this business, and I'm a developer. So I have a team, and me and the team develop it and build it. So I've kind of gone through those cycles. And locally here in Dayton, Ohio, where I'm at, I've helped other technology companies that have been in federal, helped them close stuff for USDA, Department of Energy, but then I've also helped them get into commercial accounts like Kroger and Honda and other types of companies. But what I decided a few years ago, instead of starting another internet web software development company, why don't I just help technology companies with business development? And so are you guys familiar with agile software development? That whole process? I've done it a lot. I did it at Kroger. I've even done SAFe, which is scalable, which is a huge, agile deployment. And I've used agile on all my builds. So my idea 3 years ago was to take the process of agile and apply it to business development, so that business development could actually be a business process that could be improvable and quantifiable over time. So that's really what this presentation is going to be about, is how in especially commercial, but you can also use it in government, but how to use agile in order to drive business development. The thing I didn't want to be was a sales marketing consulting sinkhole. I've interviewed dozens and dozens of CEOs of tech companies, and they kind of say the same thing. We hire salespeople, we fire them. We hire marketing companies, we fire them. I didn't want to do that. And I really wanted to add value by helping them get new clients. And so as we go through here, I'm going to show you how that we're currently helping 10 technology companies use agile in business development to actually get new business. So with that said, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And I got just a few slides. Don't want to do death by PowerPoint by any means. So basically, the idea is these four things that happen in agile business development. We start with what we call a micro campaign. Then we execute on it with the activity of that campaign. We analyze the data of what happened, and as a result, we look at market validation. And then after that, we go back to another micro campaign. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, is these four things and how they can drive getting you new clients and business development. So it's a very alternative to your traditional sales marketing approach. So a micro campaign generally will consist of just a few hundred or even 200 profiles or contacts. And the way we go about doing this is we start with what we call ICPs, or ideal client profiles. And you'll notice these are four dials that we look at, or four ways to develop that profile. And you'll notice I've kind of set them up as like a dial. So this is something that's changeable with each micro campaign. So for instance, we might look at the CEO of industrial companies, 500 million in sales below, and maybe the location is local. And so we dial in an ICP, and generally we'll do 2 or 3 of these. And then in addition to that, we look at the messaging. So, and this messaging is going to be unique to each company. But, is it something that we're going to talk about that is new or a differentiator? Is it something we're improving? Whatever that messaging might be. But this isn't necessarily a heavy marketing message. It's more of a message to get meetings with someone. And so that's basically what we start out with our micro campaign. So the idea is to do an outreach through either the phone, email, or social media. And we have automated mechanisms to do each of those. And this isn't advertising, but it's really a personalized message to get a connection with someone to drive toward a meeting. And so that's a lot of what we've found drives the activity of business development is getting meaningful meetings. So it's an alternative way to your search engine optimization, digital content marketing, advertising. Those are all very traditional, and I'm not saying those don't work. I mean, they do, but the amount of effort that goes into those and the amount of resource is way more than what we're finding in doing more of a cold outreach. So any questions on that, on connecting up? Okay. And we're going to go back and forth between these slides, but the third thing that happens after we do this activity of working at connecting with folks and getting meetings with them is we're looking at 3 key performance indicators, 3 KPI. A meaningful meeting that leads to proposals, that leads to new business. And that's really what we're wanting to look at as far as a data set and how we're doing data analysis. And we actually execute on that with our client. So the idea is that if you're not having meaningful meetings, no matter what activity you're doing, it's probably not going to drive to new business. So some of our clients and some of the work that we've done is we'll wrap this KPI around a search engine optimization or digital content marketing. What we're wanting to do is look at, are any meetings coming out of that activity? And, I've done a lot of networking events and even seminars and all of that activity. But this is the way that we measure whether there's a success at it. The other thing we're looking at in the data is we're wanting to find patterns and we're wanting to find trends of these ICPs. So the idea is what ICP and what messaging combination is leading to those meaningful meetings. So that's a really important part of the data set is we're looking at reverse engineering those meaningful meetings to find out what ICP and what message led to those meetings. Because we found unless we have a volume of data, it's difficult to start making decisions of what's going to be happening in sales and marketing. So the fourth thing that'll happen in this activity is the market validation. So what you're looking at here is this cone of uncertainty. And what we found is in software development, with any project, you have a cone of uncertainty in the software development arena. And what we're doing is applying that same principle to business development. So just like when you start with a software project, you really don't know exactly what the client is going to want until you do the discovery, until you start going down this path. And if you use Agile, you're doing this in iterations so that you're improving over time. And so now that cone of uncertainty of what the client wants to what you think that they want continues to narrow if you're doing this agile activity successfully. Well, the same principle applies in business development. If you're going through these agile iterations on a regular basis and you're applying those activities of steps 1, 2, and 3, then this cone of uncertainty in your market will continue to close in a gap. And you're going to close in on certain ideal client profiles with certain messages that resonate. So what we found, a lot of technology companies, they don't have a cone of uncertainty. They have more of a corridor. And they just keep doing the same thing over and over and over. And they're not really refining their process through agile. So what I'd like to do is open it up to any questions that anyone has on this process. Okay, we're going to go back. So the idea is we start executing on these micro campaigns. And because we're doing them in small increments of like 200, and we're not like burning through thousands, that is one of the keys in order for this iteration to happen. So as we execute on that micro campaign, and we set that campaign up with certain ICPs and messaging, we run through that activity, we analyze the data, and then we see whether or not we're getting market validation. Then we queue up another micro campaign and run through it again. And you may be doing several micro campaigns at the same time, but the idea is to fail fast. So if there is certain ICPs, as we look at in the title of the person, the industry, size, location, and actually we can add more dials to this or more different dynamics or elements to it. It doesn't have to be tied to these four. But as you start looking at that, now you can start to validate whether or not that market is responding to your messaging. So a couple of things that you want to look at changing is not only your ICP, but also maybe your offering or the messaging around your offering in order to drive those KPIs, which again are those connections. And this activity is not limited, just to one of these channels, but we've found that actual social media through LinkedIn has been a very, very powerful channel in order to do this agile process and get the appropriate amount of data churning through it. And so as we get meaningful meetings on the calendar, we're finding that those can lead to proposal and then new business. And the important thing is that we look back at the data month in and month out. So what we want to look at, and like for some companies, we'll see, okay, well, maybe 50 meaningful meetings will lead to 15 proposals, and that'll lead to one new client. And what we want to look for are patterns in that ICP. So we want to look for patterns of what type of company was it and what messaging is leading to that new business. And just like in any business process, the more data you have, the better decisions that you're going to make. So we found that this activity actually does market validation that can provide direction for any type of future marketing or sales activity. So there's really a lot of discovery that actually happens through this whole process. So even if you are not having the success that you would like, because you're using Agile, you are collecting data to help you make decisions going forward. So you don't do the same thing for months and months and not really get the result that you want. So some of the things that we have seen as far as transitioning from and how this process works, transitioning from government to commercial. And I've done the RFP churn and done a lot of different types of RFP responses, and won some, lost a lot. One of the things that you'll find in commercial that opens up is the ability to connect more, with your market. And so that's one of the things that Agile really helps with is, as you're making those connections, really looking at the data of who you're connecting with, and also looking at more of a solution sell and listening to more of the problems and issues that are happening in the market, and then adjusting what your offering is in order to accommodate those things. And when you're in the commercial arena, there's really a lot going on as far as different types of projects, different types of problems and issues, and you're able to establish more of a dialogue than maybe you might not be able to do in the government sector because of the RFPs that you're responding to, or maybe based more on some relationships that you have. Whereas in commercial, it's really all about making new connections, new relationships, and then also finding out or analyzing the data of what connections and relationships or meetings are going to actually move toward new business. So one of the things that happens a lot is kind of what I call a false funnel, or activity that happens in marketing that kind of gives a sense of accomplishment, but it's not really leading to new business. And so that's why we go back to these KPI, and no matter what activity that you do in sales and marketing, we found that putting these KPI around that activity really gives you an idea of whether or not it's leading to new business or new clients. And so really scrutinizing any sales and marketing activity very closely, so that you are looking at the data of the meetings down to proposal, down to new business, so that you're not continuing to put time and effort and resource into an activity or different types of strategy that's not really leading to new business or new clients. And that's one of the things that we've been able to help quite a few government contract companies with, is making sure that they're looking at the data. So with that said, that's basically the conclusion of Agile business development. There is quite a bit more that as far as stories and experiences that we've had, and everyone's available for a personal consultation with me at no cost, by means of a meeting. So that's something that's available. So feel free to reach out and to set that up. If you'd like more information, be happy to meet with you and dive deeper into some of the case studies. So at this point, I will open it up to questions. Anybody have? I know some joined late. But anyone have any questions related to the Agile business development process and how it can help you transition to commercial?
I got a question, Mark.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things I wanted to ask you with respect to your experience and what you've seen with respect to the commercial market, how the customer really responds to the discovery process, and essentially navigating around, in most cases, when we start talking about IT software, depending on the product, discovery isn't free, right? Because
right.
You have resources that you're using, you're deploying manpower, and unlike on the Fed side, you expect that because you have to respond to a request, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
The commercial atmosphere is much different of a landscape, because you have to really dig into those pain points, establish the value prop. But the challenge that I see is majority of the customers in the commercial market really just sit on proposals a lot of times, and they're not as responsive with respect to the discovery process, especially when it involves, some form of cost associated with it. So my question is,
Right.
what is your experience around that, and any tips on how to best navigate that issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there is an RFP process in commercial. And we found it, mostly in larger organizations will have that more. And as you come down the food chain, and you may have companies that are 1,000 employees, they may not have a real formalized RFP. And the nice thing is, unlike in government where they kind of go into this cone of silence, this silence, you can't really
Mhm.
talk to them. Commercial, it's not as much that way, and it's not as strict. Um, so one of the things that I've typically used Discovery for is in situations where they're not going out to RFP. It's kind of in those very beginning stages, and
Mhm.
it's a way to create a trust and relationship. So a lot of the successes that I've had in all size organizations, I mean, from Fortune 500 on down, is using Discovery as a tool to build goodwill and to start relationships. And it doesn't necessarily have to be for free. Many times they're glad to pay for it, especially if you can. One of the things that's really important in having those meetings, because a lot of times it'll start with a meeting, is basically describing that discovery process. And also the thing that they're always going to want to know is, what's the deliverable? What am I going to get? And so
Mhm.
having that defined up front. And many times in commercial, they understand that the discovery process is really part of the whole project. So they can look at you and say, okay, yeah, can you help me with this discovery process? You may or may not be the vendor I choose, but could you at least help me get started? Now, the thing in government, in federal, you can do that in federal, which we've done it, like for USDA, but it will keep you out of the RFP, because
Mhm.
basically, if you help with that, you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to help with that, and then because you've got this inside scoop, you can't bid on
Mhm.
the RFP. The cool thing, commercials not always like that. Many times it's not. They'll say, yeah, help me with discovery. Oh, and by the way, when we put this out, we'd like for you to bid on it. So yeah, I mean, it really, look at discovery as a tool to build relationship and build goodwill, is the way I definitely look at it.
Gotcha.
No, good question. Good question. Appreciate that. Any other questions on the agile business development process, or just going from government to commercial in general? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody attending. And again, feel free to reach out to me. I can actually, in the chat here, I'll go ahead and put put my email address, and feel free to shoot me an email, and we can set up a one-on-one Zoom meeting, and be happy to go into any other case studies or success stories that we've had over the years. A couple companies here locally. Some of the companies that I've worked with are anywhere from 40 to 400 employees in size. There's technology companies like CDO, Rainbow Data, Evoke Technologies, Rainbow, also Ardent Technologies. These companies, I've helped them, get into Kroger. I've helped them, get into other types of commercial accounts, and most of it has been, what we used to hear as the guerrilla marketing. We'd hear that term. So a lot of it, basically, really the agile piece is kind of taking guerrilla marketing and putting agile on it so that it is a process that's improvable over time. And a lot of the stuff I've done is all, most of it's been based on cold outreach through the phone, through LinkedIn, through email. But now the cool thing is there's a lot of ways to automate a lot of that activity that we've looked at. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and appreciate you taking the time. Any other questions anybody have before we conclude? All right, great. Well, thanks again, and happy Friday. Hope you have a good rest of your day.